The sound of my car keys sliding off the counter was sharp enough to cut through the hum of the dishwasher. She didn't even bother hiding it. Not every betrayal comes from strangers. Sometimes it starts at your own kitchen counter. Watch this emotional revenge story till the end, because silence can be the most powerful revenge of all. I turned just in time to see her fingers curling around the keychain. My keychain, the one with the small silver locket my husband had given me years ago. Her lips curved into that same cocky smile she'd worn since we were kids, the one that always came right before she got her way. "Don't even think about it," I said quietly. She tilted her head, not in fear but amusement, like a cat batting at a mouse. "Relax. Mom and Dad will smooth this over," she said. That line hit me harder than I'd like to admit. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Certain. Unbothered. Dialed. For a moment I stood there frozen in my kitchen. The late afternoon light stretched across the tiles, dust dancing in the golden beams. The smell of the chicken casserole I'd baked earlier still hung in the air. Everything felt domestic calm, except for the cold wave rising in my chest. This wasn't the first time she'd crossed a line. But this time I didn't yell. I didn't chase her like before. Instead, a strange calm settled over me. I reached for my phone, opened the camera and started recording. She didn't notice. She was too busy twirling the keys on her finger like a trophy. "You really shouldn't," I said, but my tone was different now, measured, not pleading. She paused, eyes narrowing for a second. I smiled faintly, giving nothing away. Inside, my thoughts were already moving like clockwork. I had something she didn't know I had. Something that would make this time different. She shrugged and strutted toward the front door. Her shoes clicked against the floor in a rhythm that sounded almost rehearsed. I followed slowly, leaning against the doorway as she stepped outside. The engine roared to life. She revved it twice, deliberately looking at me through the windshield. Her friends had gathered at the edge of the street, laughing and waving as she pulled out like she owned the world. I lifted my phone and captured the entire scene. Her grin, the license plate, the exact time on my stove clock reflected in the window behind her. Evidence. Quiet, clean, irrefutable. As the sound of my car faded down the street, I stood there for a long moment. My hands were steady. My heart, surprisingly, wasn't racing. It was beating slow and heavy, like the ticking of a clock before something inevitable. I walked back into the kitchen, wiped the counter and set the casserole back in the oven to keep warm. I wasn't going to chase her. Let her think she'd won, that I'd fold like I always did. Let her get comfortable. That evening she sent a group text in the family chat. A selfie behind the wheel, oversized sunglasses on, laughing. "Best ride ever, smiling face with sunglasses, automobile sparkles," she wrote. My parents reacted with heart emojis. I stared at the screen, a bitter laugh slipping from my lips. They didn't even ask. Around 6:45 p.m. Mom called. "Honey," she started, her voice soft and layered with that practiced guilt she'd perfected over decades. "She's just borrowing it for a bit. You know how she is." "I do," I said evenly. "You don't need to make this bigger than it is." I looked out the window, watching the street lamps flicker on one by one. "I'm not making anything big," I replied. "I'm just not pretending anymore." She sighed dramatically. "You're always so rigid. She's your sister. And that's supposed to make theft okay? Don't say it like that," she whispered quickly, as if the word itself might stain her. "It's family." I let the silence hang. It made her nervous. She cleared her throat and changed the subject, but I knew she'd already made her choice. She was on my sister's side, just like always. The next morning I walked past the empty driveway on my way to fetch the newspaper. The neighbor across the street, Mrs. Keating, waved politely, her eyes flicking toward the missing car. "Out early?" she asked. "Something like that," I said with a thin smile. I could tell by her look that she'd seen my sister leave in the car yesterday. Word would spread, as it always did in our neighborhood. But that was fine by me. I wasn't hiding this time. I spent the afternoon gathering things. Registration papers. Insurance records. Text messages from last week where she'd asked to borrow the car and I'd said no. It all went neatly into a manila folder. There was something strangely satisfying about it, like setting a table for a guest you knew was coming. Late afternoon again. She returned. The sound of the engine pulling into the driveway was smug. She parked crookedly as if to say, "I don't have to try." I watched from the window as she stepped out, hair tossed back, sunglasses perched on her head. She didn't look at the house. She looked at her reflection in the car window. I stepped outside just as she turned to leave. Had fun? I asked. She jumped slightly, not expecting me there. Yeah, she said casually. I'm taking it again tomorrow. I need it for the weekend. There was not a request, a statement. I folded my arms. You're not taking it again. She rolled her eyes. You always do this. You act like you own everything. Mom and Dad already said it's fine. They don't own my car, I said sharply. Her smile returned, a little crueler this time. They'll make you forgive me. They always do. It was like a script we'd played out our whole lives. She messed up. I held the line. They swooped in to protect her. I gave in. She laughed. But this time something shifted. I didn't argue. I didn't threaten. I just looked at her. Really looked at her. And let the silence stretch so long that her confidence started to crack at the edges. Keep talking, I finally said softly. I'm listening. She frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said. Yet. That evening, as the house quieted down and the sun dipped low, I stood by the kitchen window again. The car sat in the driveway, gleaming under the streetlight. She thought she'd won. She always did when Mom and Dad were involved. I picked up my phone and opened the recording from yesterday. Her grin. The engine revving. The friends cheering. I scrolled through the timestamps, making mental notes. Then I tucked the phone away and exhaled slowly. Not this time. This time I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to play the predictable role she expected. This time I had a plan. And she wouldn't see it coming. The next morning at breakfast, my parents dropped by unannounced. Mom's tone was bright, too bright. Dad cleared his throat before speaking, like he was preparing for a performance. Sweetheart, Mom began, placing a plate of pastries on the table as if sugar could soften the blow. Let's not make a mountain out of a molehill. She just needed the car for a couple of errands. She took it, I replied, buttering my toast calmly. Without permission. Dad frowned. Your sisters. You share. No, I said, looking up at him. I share when I choose. Not when someone steals. The word landed heavy in the air. Mom shifted uncomfortably. Dad glanced at her, then back at me. I could see it in their eyes. They weren't used to this version of me. The quiet one. The unshakable one. By the time my sister came over that evening, the tension was thick enough to slice. She walked in without knocking as usual, her tone light. We need to talk, she said. I stayed seated. Go ahead. She laughed nervously. Why are you acting like this? It's just a car. Exactly, I said. It's just a car. So why did you take it after I said no? She hesitated for the first time. Just a flicker, but I saw it. Then she straightened, crossing her arms like a child trying to mimic authority. Because I knew you'd get over it. You always do. I leaned back slowly in my chair. Maybe not this time. Her jaw tightened. For the first time, uncertainty crept into her expression. She opened her mouth to speak, but I stood up. Face to face. Two sisters. One accustomed to winning. One quietly done playing. I hope you had a nice drive, I said evenly. She blinked, confused by my calmness. That confusion was exactly what I wanted. I walked past her, leaving her standing in the doorway, unsure for once what was coming next. I walked past her, leaving her in the doorway, still unsure why I wasn't yelling. That confusion stayed with her. I could see it in the way she stood there longer than usual, waiting for the fight that never came. But I had no intention of giving her the satisfaction. That night the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't soothe, it sharpens. I brewed a cup of chamomile tea, letting the steam fog up the kitchen window, and stared at the car sitting in the driveway under the streetlight. He thought this was over. She thought she'd rattled me into another surrender. Instead, the silence became my ally. When people think you're done fighting, they get sloppy. And she was about to get very sloppy. The first sign came the next morning. My phone buzzed before I'd even finished my toast. A photo in the family group chat. Her standing beside my car outside a cafe, holding a paper cup like a queen surveying her kingdom. A friend had tagged her location underneath. I stared at the picture for a full minute. She hadn't even asked to take the car again. She'd simply taken it, again. Mom reacted with 2 heart emojis. Dad wrote, "Looks fun." I didn't respond. I just saved the image, checked the timestamp, and quietly slid my phone into the folder where I'd started collecting evidence. By mid-afternoon, another image appeared, this time outside the mall. She brought friends. They were leaning against my car, laughing. One of them even wrote, "She finally got her dream car," smiling face with heart as dot. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I could practically see the rope tightening around her neck, one careless post at a time. Around lunchtime, Mom called again. "She's just using it for errands," she said casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "She didn't ask," I replied. Mom sighed. "Honey, why are you making this into a police matter in your head? She's your sister." That line again. She's your sister. As if blood ties excused everything. As if decades of being the responsible one meant I was obligated to swallow this too. "I'm not making anything," I said. "I'm watching." There was a pause on the other end. "Watching what?" "You'll see," I murmured and ended the call before she could probe further. By evening, my sister still hadn't returned the car. She finally pulled up around 8 p.m., music blaring, headlights sweeping across the living room like a stage spotlight. I didn't go outside to confront her. I stayed at the kitchen table going through my folder. Inside were the basics. Registration, insurance, her text where I'd clearly said no, screenshots of her posts, and timestamps from the group chat. I slipped everything into plastic sleeves like a librarian preserving a rare book. It wasn't just paperwork. It was power, silent, documented power. The more I organized, the calmer I felt. I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. She burst through the door laughing into her phone. "Yeah, it's fine, I'll have it again tomorrow," she told whoever was on the other end. Then she saw me at the table, papers neatly spread out. For a moment her smile faltered. "What's all that?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Nothing you need to worry about," I said, gathering the folder. She frowned. "You're acting weird." "I'm just being me," I replied, then walked away before she could ask more. Over the next 2 days I gave her nothing. No complaints, no confrontations. Just silence. She took the car twice more, bragged online both times, and even borrowed gas money from Mom to fill it up for me. The thing is, she'd built her confidence on my reactions. When I yelled, she got louder. When I chased, she ran faster. But silence? She didn't know what to do with silence. By the 3rd day, small cracks began to show. She started asking, "Why are you being so quiet?" in texts. I'd reply with a single thumbs up or sure. That drove her crazy. Mom, of course, joined in. "She's worried you're upset," she said over the phone. "I'm not upset," I replied calmly. "She'll understand soon." I could almost hear the unease growing in Mom's voice. "Understand what?" "Nothing yet." That weekend I ran a small errand to the grocery store. Mrs. Keating, my neighbor, intercepted me in the parking lot. "Your sister's been quite the driver lately," she said with a raised brow. "I've seen that car out more in the last few days than in the last year." I smiled politely. "She's enjoying herself." "She seems to think it's hers," Mrs. Keating added, almost gossiping. "Told the lady at the salon she got a family gift." I thanked her and moved on, but inside I was glowing. Every lie she told, every careless comment, people remembered. And when the truth surfaced, they'd remember even more clearly who had been quiet the entire time. That evening, as she flaunted herself on social media, I quietly sat at my desk, printing everything. Pictures, texts, group chat screenshots, even Mrs. Keating's little tidbit typed into a note. Each sheet slid into the folder with a satisfying snap. The printer's rhythmic hum became the soundtrack of my resolve. She thought silence meant weakness. She was about to learn it meant strategy. 2 days later, Mom and Dad invited both of us over for dinner. I knew what it was, a staged family talk, their usual way of forcing harmony. The table was set with Mom's best dishes. Chicken pot pie, green beans with bacon, fresh rolls. The smell was comforting, but the tension was already thick. She arrived late, breezing in like a celebrity making an entrance. "Sorry, had to stop for coffee," she said, dropping her bag on a chair like she owned the place. Dad cleared his throat. "We want to talk about the car." I said nothing, sipping my water slowly. She leaned back, arms folded. "She's overreacting. I needed it." End of story. Mom looked at me. Sweetheart, maybe if you'd just be a little more flexible. I set down my glass gently, the sound crisp against the table. I'm not being inflexible, I said. I'm just not being naive. She scoffed. Oh, here we go. No, I said, locking eyes with her, my voice steady. Here you go. The silence after that line wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. I let it stretch, watching her shift uncomfortably in her chair. She tried to provoke me with a laugh. You're acting like I stole something. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't you? Her face stiffened, but before she could answer, Dad intervened. Let's not escalate. I'm not escalating, I said softly. I'm observing. Mom gave me a nervous smile. Honey, what does that mean? I leaned back, folded my hands on the table and said, You'll see soon enough. After dinner, I lingered by the door as she slipped on her jacket. She looked irritated. You're being dramatic, she muttered. Am I? I asked. She stopped, one hand on the doorknob, suddenly unsure again. What are you planning? I tilted my head, letting a small smile creep in. Planning? Nothing. Just letting things unfold. He hated that answer. I could see it in the way she yanked the door open and stormed out. That night, my phone buzzed with a flurry of messages. Hers, Mom's, even one from Dad. All trying to figure out what I meant. I answered none of them. The silence was working. She was unraveling, not because I'd done something but because she knew I was doing something, she just couldn't figure out what. And in that space between her arrogance and her uncertainty, the trap settled quietly into place. The silence was working. She was unraveling, not because I'd done something but because she knew I was doing something, she just couldn't figure out what. And in that space between her arrogance and her uncertainty, the trap settled quietly into place. I slept deeply that night. No racing thoughts. No guilt. Just the kind of sleep you get when you finally stopped carrying everyone else's mess. When I woke up, the morning light was soft, filtering through the curtains like thin gold ribbons. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table and waited, not out of impatience but out of certainty. Some things don't need to be rushed. They arrive right on time. It started just after noon. I was folding laundry when I saw 2 police cars pull up across the street. My heart didn't leap. It didn't race. Vest steadied. From the window I watched the officers step out, calm, methodical. They checked their notes, then crossed the street. Their shoes crunched over the fallen leaves on my front path. The sound was oddly satisfying. They knocked on the door, polite but firm. I opened it with a steady hand. Mrs. Walker? The older officer asked. Yes, I replied. He nodded. We're following up on a vehicle report you filed last week. Is now a good time to talk? The folder was already on the entryway table. I handed it to him like I'd been expecting this moment, which in truth I had. We sat at the kitchen table while they went through the documents. The younger officer flipped through the plastic sleeves, pausing at the screenshots of my sister's posts with my car. She really posted all this online? He asked. I almost laughed. She practically documented the entire thing for you. The older one gave a slow, approving nod. Makes things straightforward. They asked simple questions. When did she take the car? Did she have permission? Was this a recurring pattern? My answers were clear, calm, documented. I wasn't there to vent. I was there to provide facts. When they stood to leave, the older officer said, We'll take it from here. We'll be contacting her shortly. Will she know it came from me? I asked. Not because I planned to hide, but because I wanted to gauge their answer. He met my gaze. She'll figure it out. I'm counting on it, I said quietly. I watched through the window as they drove down the street. A strange mix of emotions swirled inside me. Not glee, not regret, but something sharper. Power. Not the cruel kind. The earned kind. The kind that comes when someone has underestimated you for far too long. 2 days later it happened. I was kneeling in the garden, trimming back the rose bushes before the autumn chill set in when my phone buzzed. A neighbor, Judy, had sent a message. Is everything okay with your sister? I just saw something strange at her office. I wiped my hands on my gardening apron and called her. There are police cars in the parking lot, Judy whispered like it was juicy neighborhood gossip. And I swear I saw them walk her out. I felt the cool October breeze brush against my neck. I stood slowly, pruning shears still in my hand, and looked up at the clear blue sky. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the one scrambling to clean up her mess. I felt still. Steady. Within an hour my phone exploded. First came Mom. "What did you do?" she demanded. No hello. No pleasantries. Her voice trembled between anger and panic. "I filed a report," I said simply. "You called the police on your sister?" she hissed like I'd committed a sin. "No," I replied. "She made choices. I documented them. The police acted." She was silent for a beat. "She's at her office. They're talking to her in a conference room. People are watching. She's humiliated." I leaned against the counter, tracing a line on the cool marble with my finger. Good. Maybe humiliation will do what lectures never did. She could lose her job. She should have thought of that before she took something that wasn't hers, I said, my voice steady. Mom's tone cracked. "She's your sister. And I'm your daughter," I said softly. "You just forgot that part for a while." Next came my sister. She called 3 times before I picked up. The moment I answered, all I heard was her voice, high, breathless, on the edge of tears. "You have to fix this," she said. "No hello. No apology." "Fix what?" I asked, almost curious. "The police showed up at my office. Do you have any idea what that looks like?" "Yes," I replied calmly. "I have a very clear picture, actually." She gasped. "You reported me?" "I filed the truth," I said. "You're insane. Mom and Dad will never forgive you for this." "Mom and Dad aren't the law," I replied. "And neither are you." For a moment, there was nothing but her shaky breathing. Then she whispered, "They were asking about charges." "This isn't funny." "I'm not laughing," I said. "I'm listening." And then, deliberately, I repeated her own line back to her, the one that had started all of this. "Mom and Dad will smooth it over, right?" The silence on her end wasn't confused this time. It was terrified. That night I didn't sleep as easily. Not because I doubted what I'd done, but because I was standing at a threshold. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about decades of patterns. She had always been untouchable. I was always the cleanup crew. But tonight the roles had shifted. Permanently. I lay in bed listening to the wind rattle the branches outside and thought of her sitting in that office, forced to face something she couldn't charm her way out of. It wasn't joy I felt. It was relief. The next day Dad showed up unannounced. He never did that. His car pulled into the driveway like a storm cloud. He knocked hard like a man on a mission. When I opened the door, he didn't step inside. He just stared at me. "Your mother is a wreck," he said. "She should talk to the right person about that," I replied. He shook his head. "She's your sister. This is family business. You should have come to us first." I crossed my arms. "I did. Repeatedly. You told me to be flexible. You sent emojis to her selfies with my car. So I handled it the way adults do with paperwork." He exhaled through his nose, frustrated. "This isn't how family works." "No," I said quietly. "This is how accountability works." For a moment I saw something unfamiliar flicker across his face. Not anger. Recognition. He'd always thought I was soft. That I'd never stand up to her. This wasn't the daughter he was used to. He left without another word. 2 days later the police called again, not to question me but to confirm a few follow-ups. They were professional, almost routine. But hearing the words, "active investigation," attached to my sister's name made the air in the room feel heavier. I sat on the porch that evening, wrapped in a shawl as the sun dipped below the trees. A faint chill lingered in the air, carrying the scent of damp leaves and chimney smoke from a neighbor's fire. My hands wrapped around a mug of tea, warm against the cool evening. I thought about calling her. I didn't. I thought about explaining myself to Mom. I didn't. For once, I let the silence speak louder than excuses. That weekend she showed up at my door. I saw her through the glass before she knocked. Hair pulled back messily, makeup streaked, wearing sweatpants instead of her usual styled outfits. Small. When I opened the door, she didn't step in. She stood on the porch like a stranger. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "They said this could get serious. You can make it stop." I tilted my head slightly. "Why would I do that?" "Because I'm your sister," she whispered. I studied her face. For years I'd dreamed of a day she'd apologize, take responsibility, or at least see what she did to me. But now that she stood there, stripped of her arrogance, begging, I didn't feel vindication. Felt tired. I didn't start this, I said softly. You did. She tried to speak again, but I closed the door gently, leaving her on the porch. For once she was the one left in the cold. I closed the door gently, and the sound of the latch clicking echoed through the hallway like a quiet verdict. I leaned my back against the wood for a moment, listening. No yelling. No pounding. Just silence. Then, after a few seconds, her footsteps retreated down the porch steps. I exhaled slowly, pressing my palms against the door. A part of me expected to feel guilt. Another part of me braced for second thoughts. Neither came. What filled the space instead was something steadier, quieter, like finally exhaling after holding your breath for years. The next morning the world felt different. Not in a grand, cinematic way, just in the way small things shift when an invisible line has been crossed. The sun rose like always, the kettle whistled like always, and yet the house seemed to hum with a different kind of energy. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, scrolling through my phone. The neighborhood Facebook group was unusually busy. People posted about a situation at the insurance office downtown, the same one where my sister worked. Words like police presence and arrest rumors floated through the comments. Nobody mentioned names, but I didn't need them to. As I read the threads, I felt a peculiar mix of calm and detachment. For years, any mention of her name, especially connected to trouble, would have sent me scrambling to shield her. But not now. I wasn't rushing to fix. I was watching the truth catch up to her, one whisper at a time. By noon, Mom called. I didn't even have to look at the caller ID to know the tone she'd use. She's embarrassed, Mom said immediately. No greeting, just straight into defense mode. Everyone at the office knows. People are talking. I stirred sugar into my tea slowly, letting the spoon clink against the ceramic. They're talking because she did something, I said. She made a mistake, Mom snapped. She stole, I replied calmly. There's a difference. For a moment, I heard only her breathing on the other end. Then quieter, she's not handling it well. She's never had to, I said. She's your sister. I smiled bitterly. Yes. And I'm your daughter. But you keep forgetting that part. Mom didn't have a response. She muttered something about dinner later in the week and hung up. That evening, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. The air carried that crisp autumn bite and leaves crunched softly beneath my shoes. As I turned the corner near the community park, I saw two of my neighbors, Mrs. Keating and Judy, standing by the mailboxes. Their conversation stopped the second they saw me. I wasn't offended. I knew how this worked. In small towns, gossip travels faster than wind. Mrs. Keating gave me a sympathetic smile. Quite a week, huh? Something like that, I said. Judy hesitated, then asked the question hanging between us. Is it true? About your sister? I didn't flinch. She took my car without permission, I said plainly. The police got involved. Everything else is up to the facts. Their eyes widened slightly at my matter-of-fact tone. They weren't used to me being direct. For years I'd been the one smoothing things over, covering up little dramas before they reached the neighborhood grapevine. But this time I let the truth stand on its own. As I walked away, I caught their quiet murmurs behind me, not cruel, just surprised. The mask she'd worn so effortlessly for years was starting to slip, and people were finally seeing the cracks. 2 days later she called, not sobbing this time but clipped and cold. I'm suspended, she said flatly. Pending further review. HR wants a meeting next week. I was sitting on the porch, wrapped in a shawl. I see, I said. This is your fault, she hissed. No, I replied evenly. This is yours. You could have stopped it. You chose not to. Yes, I said. I chose not to protect you this time. She went silent. I could almost hear the disbelief through the line. She wasn't used to me choosing myself. You've ruined everything, she whispered. No, I said softly. You just finally met consequences. She hung up without another word. The fallout didn't stop there. At Sunday service, the whispers followed us. I walked in alone as usual. He stayed home. A few church members nodded politely, but I saw the way their eyes darted toward me and then away, as if afraid to ask what everyone already half knew. After the sermon, Pastor Williams approached me gently. I heard there's been some family trouble, he said, his voice careful. There's been accountability, I corrected. He nodded slowly, a knowing look in his eyes. Sometimes the hardest truth is the one closest to home. His words stayed with me as I walked back to my car. 4 years she'd been the golden daughter, the one with the bright smile, the job, the charm. I'd been the quiet one, the dependable one. People had believed her shine without ever looking too closely. Now the shine was dimming and they were finally looking. And what they saw wasn't so golden. Midweek I stopped by Mom and Dad's for dinner, mostly out of obligation. The moment I walked in I could feel the shift. The usual cheer was replaced by something heavier. Dad barely looked at me. Mom fussed over the table settings like they were a shield. "She's not coming," Mom said quickly as if to fill the silence. "She's not feeling up to it." "She's embarrassed," I replied. Mom's hands froze mid-adjustment. "She's your sister," she repeated, like it was the only argument she had left. "Yes," I said. "And for the first time she's facing something real. Don't take that away from her." Dad finally spoke up, his tone sharper than usual. "You're enjoying this?" I turned to him slowly. "No," I said. "I'm not enjoying watching my sister fall apart. I'm finally not breaking myself to hold her up. There's a difference." He didn't reply. As dinner went on, they tried to steer the conversation toward neutral ground, but it didn't work. The air was thick with what wasn't being said. When I finished eating, I stood to leave. Mom caught my wrist. "You could still help her," she said quietly. "If you just told the police." "I told them the truth," I interrupted. "I'm not changing that." She let go slowly, her face crumpling with something that looked like both fear and disbelief. They'd built their family image around her being perfect. And now that perfection was cracking in public view, they didn't know how to hold it together. The next morning I opened my door to find a small, wrinkled envelope on the porch. No name, just my address. Inside was a handwritten note from one of her co-workers, a woman I'd met once at a holiday party. "She's been bragging about taking the car for weeks. Everyone thought it was a gift. We were shocked when the police came. Just wanted you to know some of us saw through it sooner than you think." I read the note twice. It wasn't dramatic, just honest. And somehow that honesty felt like a quiet validation. Other people had noticed the cracks too. They just waited for someone to stop pretending. That weekend I saw her from a distance at the grocery store. She was walking quickly, hood pulled up, eyes down. No friends around her this time. She used to command rooms effortlessly, but now people avoided her aisle, whispered after she passed. I stood by the produce section, watching as she fumbled with a self-checkout machine, her hands shaking slightly. A small, cold truth settled in my chest. The golden image she'd wrapped herself in was never real. It was borrowed, propped up by indulgence, denial, and me. Now, stripped of that support, she looked like someone who didn't know who she was without the applause. That night, sitting on my porch under the dim glow of the streetlight, I reflected on everything. I thought about childhood, how she'd always been the center and I'd been the one quietly fixing the messes behind her. I thought about all the times I'd given in for the sake of family. And then I thought about now. About the silence. The evidence. The way she'd crumbled when the mask slipped. For the first time I didn't feel overshadowed. I felt clear. I sat on my porch under the dim glow of the streetlight, the night wrapped around me like a quiet cocoon. The air was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of damp leaves from the yard. I traced the rim of my mug with one finger and let my thoughts settle. Not racing, not loud, just steady. For the first time, clarity didn't come with guilt attached. It came with peace. The next morning began like any other, but I could feel something in the air, like the last calm breath before a door closes for good. I brewed my coffee, buttered my toast, and watched the sunlight spill across the kitchen counter. This house had seen years of me holding my tongue, softening blows, stitching torn family edges. Today it would witness something different. Just after 9 a.m. the call came. Not from her. Not from my parents. From the investigator handling the case. "Mrs. Walker," the voice said politely, "I'm calling to inform you that the case involving the unauthorized use of your vehicle has been officially referred to the prosecutor's office. There's substantial evidence. She's been notified of the charges." For a brief second my chest tightened. Not from doubt, but from the weight of finality. This was the moment the rope stopped tightening and started holding firm. "Thank you," I said calmly. The investigator paused. It's rare we get everything laid out this clearly. You documented it well. I had a long time to learn how to pay attention, I replied. That afternoon I decided to go into town. Not to gloat, never that. But because life had to keep moving even when family storms swirled around you. I ran errands, picked up groceries, and stopped by the post office. Everywhere I went, I felt the subtle shift in how people looked at me. It wasn't pity. It wasn't gossip. It was respect. Quiet, cautious, but unmistakable. For years I'd been the background figure, her shadow. The responsible sister who never made waves. Now for once, people were seeing me not as the quiet one, but as the one who drew a line and held it. When I returned home, I found her waiting in the driveway. Her car, her real car, was parked crookedly as if even in this moment she couldn't quite align herself properly. She stood by the hood, arms folded, trying to look composed. But her face betrayed her. The sharp edges were dulled, the confidence cracked. She looked like someone who'd rehearsed a confrontation in the mirror and still didn't believe the words would work. I parked, stepped out, and closed the door gently behind me. She didn't waste time. They called me, she said. Her voice was low but trembling. They're filing charges. Do you have any idea what this means for me? I met her gaze steadily. Yes, I said. I do. She stared at me like she was searching for the sister she used to manipulate. You can stop this. You know you can. No, I said softly. I won't. Her arms fell to her sides. Why? After everything, why would you do this to me? I took a step closer, my voice calm but firm. I didn't do this to you. I stopped covering for you. There's a difference. She shook her head, tears threatening. Mom and Dad are devastated. They say you've broken this family. I let out a quiet laugh, not cruel, just tired. I didn't break anything. I stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. We stood there in the driveway, the October breeze cutting through the silence between us. For the first time in our lives, she wasn't in control of the narrative. She wasn't charming her way out. There was no room for twisting facts or leaning on family sympathy. This was reality, raw and unfiltered. Her eyes hardened suddenly, one last attempt to play the role. You're doing this because you've always been jealous, she said bitterly. I tilted my head. Jealous of what? Of me. Of how everyone liked me more. How they listened to me. I took a slow breath. I'm not jealous. I'm just done watching you walk over everyone and then act surprised when you finally trip. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. That evening, Mom and Dad asked me to come over. I knew why. Their voices on the phone had that practiced weight, the serious talk tone they used when they wanted me to smooth things over. When I arrived, they were both sitting at the kitchen table like a tribunal. Mom's eyes were red. Dad's jaw was set. A pot of stew simmered on the stove, filling the house with the familiar scent of thyme and beef. It should have been comforting. They said it felt heavy. Mom started. They're saying this could ruin her career. Dad added, this has gone far enough. She's your sister. I sat down slowly, folding my hands on the table. I didn't ruin her career. She did that the moment she took what wasn't hers and thought no one would hold her accountable. She's family, Dad said again louder. So am I replied evenly. They both stared at me, speechless. For once, I didn't fill the silence. I let them sit with it. Mom's voice softened. You've always been the strong one. The forgiving one. Can't you just? I cut her off gently. No. That's exactly the problem. I've always been the one to bend to make room for her mistakes. And you've always let her believe that would last forever. It won't. Dad rubbed his forehead, looking older than I'd ever seen him. This isn't how I pictured our family ending up. It's not ending, I said quietly. It's just honest now. The conversation didn't end with hugs or promises. It ended with silence. Not the sharp, angry kind. The kind that settles in when truth has been spoken and there's no going back. A week later, the formal notice arrived. She had been charged. It wasn't jail time, she'd likely get probation and fines, but it was official. Her name was attached to something real now, something that couldn't be spun away at family dinners or hidden behind a charming smile. She lost her job 2 days after. The company released a polite statement about standards of conduct. The Golden Daughters title didn't protect her there. When I read the news online, I didn't feel triumph. What I felt was a quiet, anchored certainty. The ledger had balanced itself. One evening as the sun dipped below the trees, she came by one last time. No confrontation. No accusations. Just a knock on the door and her standing there, hands shoved in her jacket pockets, eyes tired. I wanted to say, she hesitated, swallowing hard. I didn't think it would go this far. I studied her face, the familiar curves of someone I'd grown up with, now shadowed by the weight of her own choices. I know, I said. She shifted. You're not going to. I mean, there's nothing left to fix, is there? No, I said softly. There isn't. She nodded slowly, like someone who finally understood a language she'd ignored all her life. I guess. I didn't think you'd ever stop. I met her eyes. Neither did I. She left without another word. I watched her walk down the driveway, her shoulders slumped. The mask was gone. What was left was raw, real, and no longer my responsibility. That night I sat alone on the porch again. The street was quiet. The air was cool. My car sat in the driveway, reflecting the porch light like a mirror. For years that car had been a symbol of control, a stage for her entitlement, a trigger for family drama. Now it was just a car again. I wrapped my shawl tighter around me, sipping my tea slowly. No yelling had been required. No dramatic speeches. Just truth, patience, and silence. For the first time in decades, I wasn't carrying her. I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't bending. Justice didn't roar through my life like a storm. It arrived quietly. And it stayed. If this story struck a chord, subscribe for more powerful revenge stories. Real emotions. Real betrayals. Quiet victories. Your next story is just one click away.